This is going to be quite a short video talking through Caligula's administrative changes and the building works that he did while he was in power. So we're going to be looking at a coin, a short section of Suetonius, a short section of Josephus, and then a relatively short section of Cassius Dio. So the first source we're going to have a look at is the coin of J19H, which is showing us that Caligula reduced the level of taxes in AD 39. So this particular coin is commemorating specifically the removal of a 0.5% auction tax, and is designed essentially to create goodwill. And the symbolism that he uses within this particular coin, as you can see here, there is this little cap that we've seen before on a previous coin when we looked at the assassination of Julius Caesar. So this is the cap of liberty, which is worn by slaves. So he is suggesting that the remission of this particular tax is freeing the Roman people from a form of slavery, which is quite obviously quite an exaggeration. But he does this to create a lot of popularity, and initially was really successful. But obviously, as you know, his reign quite quickly goes south and things start to go wrong really badly. So in your source book, you'll then need to find the section that is labelled the building works. It does not go in order, the videos of the source book necessarily, it's in the order of topics that I choose to do. And linking in with administration works is also building works, because obviously building works can be seen as forms of administration if you're building like temples and waterworks and on court cases. Courtrooms, etc. So these sources are going to look at the building works that Caligula put through. They're not going to be very positive about these building works, just as a heads up. So for example, in Suetonius it talks about no parallel can be found for Gaius's. That sounds really positive, like, oh, he built loads of stuff, except he calls them far-fetched extravagances. So it kind of summarises exactly what you're going to see. And this none of this should come as a surprise based on the video that we did about Gaius and his religion. Or his religion, he promotes himself as like a god. So he is quite extravagant in the building works he puts forward. So he invents new kinds of baths. It doesn't mean quite literally a different type of bath with weird water. It means in terms of the baths where Romans would go to have a bath and be cleaned and all the rest of it. So he invents these new types of baths. It gives you some examples which I've not highlighted. So bathing in hot and cold perfume bath oils, some pearls, golden bread, golden meats, etc, etc. So pretty pointless building work, building these new types of baths. He scatters largesse from the roof of the Julian Basilica, not a building work thing, but does show about his behaviour towards the plebs and keeping them on side. So he's quite literally kind of like throwing bread or throwing coins or whatever at the people. So I said it doesn't link to building works in the slightest, but it's quite a handy little quote which you can use in other sections. We do have that he built Liberian galleys, which are boats with 10 banks of oars, jewelled sterns and multicoloured sails. Sounds very pretty, but not particularly useful. You know, pretty ships are going to get sunk. And these ships are not built for war. This is just an example of guys building stuff that looks really nice because he can, not because it's actually really useful. And they have huge baths, banqueting halls abroad. So these boats were humongous, but have no real purpose. And that's what this little section is basically talking about. There are some other little building works that are suggested here, which could kind of be positive, but they're not because they don't really do anything. So construct moles in deep, rough water far out to sea, drive tunnels through exceptionally hard rocks, raise flat ground to the height of mountains, so like literally build up mountains, and then reduce mountains to the level of plains. Done really quickly, done with massive money, but why? No reason. They don't form tunnels. They're not being used to put up buildings or create buildings. He just sort of seems to be doing this stuff because he can. And he also says that as a result of this ridiculous building work, he in a year squanders Tiberius's entire fortune of 27 million gold pieces. So he quite literally kind of runs Rome into the ground, spending money on pretty stuff, but pointless stuff. So then we have this really it is a very nice short section of Josephus. So he constructed neither great public buildings, which could be said for the benefit of contemporaries or future generations. So literally all the building works he does is of no help for anybody. There is an exception, which is a harbour. He was going to build a harbour in order to provide facilities for the grain ships from Egypt. So that would have been a really good change, really good administrative change, really useful building works change. However, he never saw it through, and it was abandoned, half finished, basically because he lost interest. He didn't care anymore, so he just didn't even bother building the rest of it. So he starts quite well, and then just gives up, which I think is how probably a lot of us are feeling, given the current circumstances of the world at the moment. Obviously, if you're watching this video in the future, we're talking about the joy that is 2020. Then we have the section of Cassius Dio, and you'll spot that I've kind of not highlighted a huge amount in this first section. So he gives orders that a sacred precinct should be constructed to him in the province of Asia, particularly at Miletus. So others were talking about building of temples for himself. It says he set up a temple in Rome. Essentially, all this section here, sorry, I'm not looking where I'm pointing, can be linked to his policy around religion. And it basically reiterates what is said in those source sections. So it talks about the fact that he sort of wants to put his head on like the Olympian Zeus, which I think is in Suetonia, so from memory, but I'm probably wrong on that one. The fact that in here somewhere it talks about his daughter being born. So it all kind of ties in with things that we've already talked about. We do have specifically the Temple of Castor and Apollos, was stood forms cut in two, so he kind of divides this temple because then he has gatekeepers. Yeah, okay. Some of this stuff you think, why are you doing it, mate? And I don't think he really had an answer. Again, there's some stuff about being family members being priests, which again you can tie into religion, but not particularly relevant here, so I haven't highlighted it. And then we can see that it gets a bit more relevant again. So he was collecting money in a most disgraceful and terrible way. So this is also not talking about the tax remittance, it's talking about other things he was doing. So there's a goods for sale tax on taverns, prostitutes, law courts, tradesmen, and wage earning slaves. And from all those activities, he collects loads of money. So he's collecting loads of taxes in to build, his pretty boats. But his source also talks about the fact that he was setting up kind of women and family members of people in the Senate as prostitutes in like the palace, and then was collecting money from those prostitutes. So you can highlight if you want to, that's up to you. I don't think it's particularly relevant, so I haven't bothered highlighting it. So it's sort of initially, it says the masses were not really bothered about this and really kind of enjoyed him being kind of sort of over the top and sort of a bit greedy, because he's throwing out money, remember, onto like the city and bread and stuff. So initially they're quite happy, but then later, because he spends loads of money, he has to introduce some severe measures around taxes, and he inscribes them on really high boards and small letters, they can't read them, which is quite clever. But the masses, the people obviously hear about these taxes and realise what's going on, and they start to protest, and they're very, very unhappy. So he manages to turn the people against him. And that's essentially it for this particular section about the administrative changes and the building works.